Hey, welcome to another day of Bio 100. Um, I just wanted to start off with some announcements. So, there's still some issues with Learning Suite, but it seems like things are slowly being worked out. Please keep us in the loop with Learning Suite if it keeps, shutting down. You can't download things. Communicate with each other quite a bit. I've seen a lot of you trying to help each other out online within the Learning Suite itself, and I'm super grateful for you doing that because, frankly, I don't have the diversity of computers that you have. I don't have the insight that you have. As you guys try and help each other figure out how to download the videos, watch the videos, etc. I'm also looking at some other options of how to distribute the videos. There's just a lot of the complications with copyright, etc. There'd have to be some sort of use some sort of level of communication there in terms of how you guys are allowed to use these, etc. So, for example, if we put out a bunch of links to the videos or put out a Google Drive or something like that, it couldn't be shared with anyone. I mean, not that that's a huge issue, but it is just something that we have to kind of cover our bases on. Also, if there are any more questions, head over to Learning Suite. Please, leave us a message. We've been checking it pretty regularly, trying to respond to things. Let us know what we can do. The message functioning in Learning Suite seems to be working pretty well. Okay, so today we want to start off. Last time we talked about the cell, right, and all the different parts of the cell. And if you remember, what's the difference between a eukaryotic and a prokaryotic cell? I want you to think about that for a minute. I'm not going to give you the answer, right? I want you to go back and if you don't remember, hit the pause button right now and go back and figure it out. If you do remember, then what I want you to do is I want you to look at this figure right here and tell me which ones are eukaryotic and which ones are prokaryotic. Okay, kind of a lame question, and I apologize if that trapped any of you. All of these are eukaryotic, actually. They have a nucleus, they have organelle, they have membrane-bound organelles. Probably the easiest one to identify as a eukaryote was this teeny tiny little wasp here. And one of the things I want to outline here is that this wasp is actually, this is to scale, right? So that wasp is the size of an amoeba or a protist, super tiny little wasp. And this wasp is so tiny that it actually lays its eggs inside of the eggs of another incredibly small insect. So this is called a thrip. This is on the knuckle of a human being here. So you can see that it is incredibly small. They lay even smaller eggs, as you would imagine, and this wasp lays its eggs inside of this egg. And that's how their life cycle carries out. The egg will hatch, it will eat the insides of the egg, and then it will pupate and fly out and find more eggs to lay its offspring in. But there's some really interesting stuff that happens here, and this is part of the reason that this wasp is so small. Some of the very interesting things that happen here is that this insect inside of the cells that make up the neurons, they actually have no nucleus, and that's how they make themselves so small that they are able to get rid of some of the DNA that sits inside of their nucleus. Now you can imagine that would cause all sorts of trouble with getting enzymes and proteins and all sorts of things that make the cell function. So how do you think the wasp gets around this? Any thoughts? Think about it. You can read the article, but what it appears is that this wasp and these cells that have no nucleus, that are incapable of producing things like proteins and enzymes, etc., all of that production happens right before the wasp becomes an adult. So basically, they ramp up all sorts of protein production, enzyme production, all these different things are all ramped up right before the insect gets wings and turns into an adult, and the adult only lives about 5 days. So a lot of my students at this point are like, well, wait a second, there's no nucleus. So is it a eukaryote or is it not a eukaryote? Well, I'll let you think about that. What do you think? Hint, some of its cells still have nuclei. Okay, so what are we studying today?
Those eggs were a lie, Stevie. A lie! They give me no eagle powers! They give me no nutrients! Sorry.
All right, so we are studying the very last word, nutrients. Why do we even need nutrients? Think about that for a minute. You, as a living, breathing, functioning human being, why do you need nutrients? Well, nutrients play two critical roles. They provide chemical building blocks and they provide energy. Animals, of which we are consumers. There's nutrition from other organisms. It's released by digestion. This is kind of how it works, right? Food comes in, digestion. The unabsorbable material is passed out of your body through elimination. The usable material are nutrients that are absorbed and transported in the bloodstream. You get molecules of nutrients that maintain growth and others that are used for energy. But what happens when this gets out of whack? What happens when we either don't get enough or we get too much? Kind of in short, why do we love this stuff? These two right here eating, like, why do we love this so much? I want you to just hit the pause button. I want you to think about this, and then I want you to come back. Okay, so just say out loud, what are some of the reasons that you think that we as human beings love this stuff? Right? I would argue that one of the reasons we love this stuff so much is that it's part of our evolutionary background, and that we have been taught to, that not that we've been taught, but that our bodies are hardwired to enjoy things that are fatty, that are sugary, and that can maintain us. And those are signals for maintenance, because if you think about our evolutionary origins, there were times where our ancestors coming across, a huge amount of meat or something like that would have been exceptionally precious and hard to come by. So our bodies are hardwired for it. Secondly, almost everything in nature that's sweet is not poisonous. So there are signals here, right? That not only is this something that your body wants for its own maintenance, but it's not poisonous on top of it. So I think we're drawn to this as part of our evolutionary past. Okay, so this right here is a grain. Okay, so this is a grain of wheat. And what I'd like you to do is, you'll see all around this grain of wheat, you've got these brackets, you've got these little arrows here. I want you to try and identify what these portions of this grain of wheat are. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the pause button, take 2 or 3 minutes, try and do it. Even if you haven't done the reading, etc., hit the pause button and try your best to do it. Okay. So if we're going to run through it, this portion right up here, these layers, this is called the bran layers, right? You guys have heard of bran muffins. Things have high bran in them, and that is all kind of the exterior wrapping or the protective layers of the grain. This gives us a lot of good dietary benefits. It helps things move through our bodies. It cleans our bowels as it moves through, etc. It's really good for human health. There's also this blue, in this picture, what's blue, this is the storage tissue, so this is known as endosperm. It's really rich in starch, okay? So it's almost like this complete carbohydrate, and it consists of these long-chain glucose, right? So when you eat a loaf of bread that is just so incredibly white and delicious, you are eating almost pure endosperm or carb. And that's the difference between whole wheat and your white wheat. The whole wheat still contains the bran and other beneficial parts of the grain. So this is the germ. So this is just kind of what you think of as like the embryo of the seed, right? This is what gives rise to the plant. It's also really rich in all sorts of vitamins and minerals. There's other helpful chemicals in here that are good for our bodies to be eaten. And then the differences, and I mentioned this already, is that when you mill the wheat and you make white flour, you essentially remove the germ and the bran, which are two of the healthiest parts of the grain. So that's why you'll hear a lot of people say eat whole grains, because when you eat whole grains, you're getting the full benefit of the breads and other things that you're eating. Whereas if you just eat solid white bread all the time, you're only getting pure carbs and essentially pure endosperm. So amino acids are something that we need to get from the food we eat. There are 8 essential amino acids, and there's no one source where you can get them all, right? If you just eat one thing, like if you're just totally into corn or you're totally into beans, you're not going to get enough of these amino acids by themselves. So this is why it's really important to eat a broad diet of lots of different plants and even and animal foods, so that you can get the full amount of amino acids. Now, full disclosure, I was actually raised vegan, which means that we had no animal products in our house except for honey. We did eat honey, but it took my parents. My parents are very careful about it, and they were very careful to make sure that we were eating a very broad range of things, so that we made sure to get all of the amino acids that we needed in our diet. So, what kind of consumers are there out there? I want you to think about this for a minute. You guys have heard about consumers, right? Let's just name one right off the top: carnivores, right? T-Rex ate nothing but meat. That's what the evidence shows. So I want you to think about any other consumers that you've heard of. Okay, so animals eat other organisms. We know this, right? So they're herbivores. They eat nothing but plants. There are carnivores that eat animals only. And there are omnivores that eat both plants and animals. And then detritivores. This is probably the one that you wouldn't have come up with in class. My classes struggle to get this one. And these are things that eat dead or organic material. So I want you to just take 10 seconds here, and I want you to go through each one of these, and I want you to think of examples in your mind. This will help you lock it in if you don't already know it. So go ahead and hit the pause button and get examples of each one. Okay. I'm not going to give you examples of herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, because I'm sure you'll know those to some extent. Hint, we are one of them. And then when we come down here to detritivores, this is one where students really struggle. So these are ones that eat dead organic or organic material. I mean, you can think of this as like bacteria are really, really good at this. Fungus do some of this. Those are kind of the detritivores, and we should be incredibly grateful to them, because if it wasn't for detritivores, our planet would be smothered in a lot of gross stuff. So all of these consumers, right, in terms of animals eating other things, and I should mention, I guess bacteria are not exactly an animal. There are other detritivores, right? There are beetles, lots of insects that just eat dead organic material. For example, termites. I know a lot of you probably think termites are horrendous and we shouldn't have them. They might destroy our homes. But if we didn't have termites, there would be so much wood on the face of this planet, we'd be buried in it. So they do have a lot of good benefits. But anyway, these different ways to consume offer 3 main nutrients: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And I want you to let's do a quick review. Do you remember what the 4 major macronutrients are? Go ahead and take a second, see if you can remember those. So we had water, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids or fats, right? And then the major structure within carbohydrates, the smallest structure is a monosaccharide, amino acids, and a monoglyceride. So notice some of these macronutrients are also macromolecules from our last lecture. So how are these nutrients used? Well, you essentially have carbohydrates, right? And they're worth 4 calories, right? 4 kilocalories of energy. And these are their major uses here. So I want you to just go over this by yourself right now. Just review each one of these, and then I'll just take a pause here, and then come back to us when you're done with the pause button. Okay, so looking at this, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, if I want a lot of energy, why am I not just eating a ton of fats? Well, your body actually runs on carbs. This is the major power source of your body. Now, you need both fats and proteins for everything to run properly. And for those of you who are long distance runners, you'll know that, there's this idea of carb loading, but carb loading is done most efficiently in the presence of proteins. And that just has to do with the way that your body respirates and uses energy. But you also have to have these fatty acids and other things for your body to store energy properly, to have things to draw on in times of need. Anyway, go ahead and review this, and this is about all that you'll be responsible for. Micronutrients. So these are foods that also contain these tiny needed amounts. So these help regulate metabolism. And what are these? Well, vitamins and minerals. You've heard a lot about these, I'm sure. There are several different types of vitamins that our bodies use. So we have water-soluble and fat-soluble. So the water-soluble ones are the really popular ones you've heard of, like vitamin C. You probably have heard quite a bit about vitamin B. It's one of the things that a lot of people who are vegan or even vegetarian to some degree need to be very careful about vitamin B intake. We have fat-soluble. These are A, D, E, and K. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this, but the only vitamin that our body produces is vitamin D. So we get vitamin D by sitting out in the sun, and getting the sun's rays. It produces vitamin D in our bodies. That's why it's so important to go outside. And I actually have a personal experience with this. About 8 or 9 years ago, I started to get a pain in my shoulder, and it was debilitating. I couldn't even move. It was so intense. So I would have to go home, lie down and rest and not move that shoulder or that area of my shoulder for it seemed like at least an hour, and then the pain would start to subside, but as soon as I moved it would hurt more. Anyway, this continued on and off for quite a while, and I went to see my doctor, and he was telling me, okay, let's think about this. So anyway, I returned home, no real diagnosis. One night I'm laying in bed and I wake up and I can hear my own heartbeat in my ears. It is so scary. I'm literally saying prayers all right, this is it. Please take care of my family, etc. I'm probably going to be dead by morning, not knowing exactly how to handle the issues. And what it sounded like actually in my own head when I could hear my heartbeat, it sounded like two pieces of wet leather kind of grinding against each other just over and over again. So I went back to the doctor. He took it very seriously. We got some things checked out, and he took some blood samples, and it turned out that my vitamin D levels were about 25% of what they should have been. And once I started to take vitamin D supplements, it took a long time, but after about 6 months, I was able to overcome that pain, and that was caused by a vitamin D deficiency. So really important, get out in the sun, make sure you're out in the sun. We've only got a couple of months left of nice warm sun, so make sure you capitalize on that. But it's really important to make sure that your skin is exposed to the sun at some level each day to produce vitamin D. Essential minerals. Okay, so these are not carbon-based here. These are the macro minerals. We have sodium, calcium, phosphorus. You can read the list here. They make up about 6% of your body weight. And then we have trace elements. So these make up less than 1% of your body weight, but they are incredibly important for function. And we'll talk about two examples. So your iodine and iron. I don't know. Oh, we have one more slide before we get there. But I'm going to get to a slide in a second where if any of you guys are squeamish about, weird looking things on the human body, you probably should just look away as I lecture about it. Anyway, what's interesting is we've kind of been through all these things now, right? Like the nutrients that we have, these micronutrients, macronutrients, all that kind of stuff. When you look at the label now on anything that you buy, you see that it's actually laid out here. Here's your calories, right? Here's your fats, your proteins, your carbs. Now they add a few things, right? Like cholesterol, sodium, potassium, some of these minerals that your body needs. Here's the vitamins here, right? So it's actually all laid out there. I don't know if you guys ever thought of it that way, but what's on the side of these labels is actually just telling you exactly what we just lectured about, what your body needs to function. So, what's wrong here? Okay, sorry, I should have warned you to look away before. But I want you to look at these if you're into, if you're okay with looking at these types of images, and are you familiar with these? Have you seen these before? What's wrong with them? So go ahead and pause for a second. Okay, so if you're looking at these, what you have here on the left, this is an iron deficiency. So these, without iron, things like our hair, our fingernails, a lot of our fast-generating cells in our bodies won't form properly. And this individual's fingernails become very thin. They turn up when they grow out. They're just not very strong. Also, here on the side, this is an iodine deficiency. And what this happens is the thyroid, because the thyroid is dependent on iodine, if there's not enough iodine in the body, the thyroid will grow larger. Think of it as a net to catch iodine in the body. And if there's not enough iodine, that net will grow larger automatically to gather as much iodine as possible. And generally it's reversible, although it will get to the point sometimes where these goiters, is what they're called, as a result of lack of iodine, can become so large that individuals actually have to have surgery to have them repaired. Here's some cool links that you can follow. We're actually going to follow this link down here to kind of just circle back, and we had this question of why do we love these fatty, sugary, salty foods so much, and we'll watch this link below, this portion size me one.
We continue our special series this morning with a look at ourselves. To put it quite simply, we are a nation of overeaters. But the good news is there's some simple things that all of us can do about it, and Early Show consumer correspondent Susan Koopman has details. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Hannah. Believe it or not, you can eat fast food, chocolate, candy, and cookies and still shed pounds. You are about to meet a professor who says it all comes down to something very simple: portion control. Pizza, burgers, fries. We think they're the enemy in the battle of the bulge, but maybe not.
Yes, you can eat all those things and lose weight.
Nutrition expert Jim Painter says it's not so much what you eat, but how much you eat. He proves it in his documentary Portion Size Me, where he puts two of his students on a 30-day fast food diet.
They both ended up losing a couple of pounds. Their blood cholesterol levels dropped. Their blood lipids stayed normal. Their liver enzymes stayed normal. Everything was fine if they ate the right portion.
And this was eating fast food every day.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they ended up losing weight.
But getting the right portion size is getting harder. Painter showed us how portions have ballooned. This is a Caesar salad from 20 years ago versus today. Double the portion, double the calories. And same with the pasta and the meatballs.
Same with the pasta and meatballs. Now, if you just say, give me the regular serving, it's going to be almost twice as much.
And just look at a regular burger and fries from the 50s compared to now. But don't you think people want this? They don't want that.
They really do. And so one of the problems is that we have this idea that more is better. And if you look at people's waistlines, they are more now. And it's not better.
But is it possible to eat smaller portions and still be satisfied? Painter says yes, and to prove his point, he helped us set up an experiment.
Ice cream.
We invited this group of people to take part in an all-you-can-eat ice cream taste test.
Take as much as you want. If you want to come back for seconds, you can come back for seconds.
We started by splitting them into two separate groups. Group A was given a big scoop, big bowls, and big spoons. Group B was given a scoop, bowls, and spoons about half the size. As a result, Group A took huge portions and piled on the toppings. Once we weighed each bowl, they chowed down. Everyone in this group ate quickly. Most even came back for seconds. But watch what happened when we brought in Group B, the ones with the smaller bowls. They filled their dishes, but with smaller spoons, it took them more time to get to the bottom, and most quit after only one serving. Does everybody feel like they ate enough ice cream? Yes. Then we revealed the truth of our experiment and the results. Even though both groups told us they were completely satisfied, Group A, the one with the bigger bowls and spoons, ate twice as much as Group B.
Are you surprised that you guys ate double what they ate?
Absolutely. And I can definitely see how just the size of the bowls did it.
Why do you think your group ate less?
I guess because when you see that your bowl's full and then you eat everything in there, you feel that you had enough and that's all that you need.
Jim Painter says the lesson is simple. Control your weight by controlling your portion size.
What is the appropriate size?
I don't think you need to make a big calculation. And I tell people this, and I'm really serious about this. Reach down and grab your side. If there's more there between your thumb and your index finger than you want, think small and choose small.
Yes, I have that problem.
Don't do that now, Susie. You're pregnant. You're eating for two. What do you have here?
Well, Painter says that choosing small can be as easy as downsizing all of your plates, bowls, and glasses. So here's a look at the dinner plate that I normally use at home. It's huge, so I'm downsizing to this plate.
Okay. You know, we actually did that in our house.
Did it work?
Of course it works, because
Yeah,
you
it
put the
does.
same amount of food and it looks like it's full on the
Absolutely.
plate. He has some other great tips. He's such a funny personality, too. He said you should write everything down, right?
Yeah, he said if you start keeping track of everything that you eat, you will look at your log and say, oh my God, I'm a pig, and you'll stop eating. What happens is we lose track of how much we eat all day, so write it down, you'll lose weight.
And he says if you go out to eat, consider splitting your meal with somebody.
Right, either split your meal with your spouse or your friend immediately, or as soon as your plate comes to the table, ask the waiter or waitress for a doggy bag. And before you start eating, make your doggy bag so you only eat half.
They're going to look at you like you're absolutely nuts. Okay, the other one is buy smaller packages of foods that you like.
Right, if you're like me, you buy a bag of chips, you eat the whole thing. So he
Do you
said,
really?
well, sometimes. So he says, instead of buying the huge bag, buy the really small bag. So the single serving. And there are companies now that are making bags that are 100 calorie packs, so you know you're getting 100 calories if you eat this. And then if you really want more, you can go back and get another bag.
Yeah, but you'll feel a lot more guilty about it.
Exactly.
You did an experiment in our newsroom with candy. What was it?
Right, we put Hershey Kisses in a bowl. We started with the bowl in the center of the newsroom on our assignment desk so everyone could see it. People started eating those. Then we moved the bowl to the back of the newsroom, so it was sort of out of reach. When it was in the front and everyone could see it, people ate 3 times as more.
Oh my gosh. So the tip is to keep it out of the way and hard to get to.
Keep it out of the way.
All right, Susan Copen, thanks so much.
All right. So this is actually really interesting because in my own family, we used to eat on really large plates, even with our tiny children at the time, and when we started this. And so we decided to go to half plates. And it turns out that we were able to cut our food bill substantially. And everyone in our family is just fine, no issues, nothing at all, perfectly healthy. So something to think about, right? That just as we go to consume, that often, especially as Americans, we overconsume. And there's some really simple things we can do to make sure that we're getting the nutrients we need and not overeating at the same time. So quick run through here of how our digestive tract works. We did this a little earlier. This is more at the organ level here. So, digestion actually starts right in the mouth. As we have salivary glands that release a lot of digestive enzymes, and it starts the digestion process like really early. Okay, it'll go down the esophagus into our stomach. Once in the stomach, the liver is going to make bile that helps digest fats. The stomach is going to produce acids. We know this, right? That these are enzymes that can break down proteins. The gallbladder releases more bile as well. The pancreas is going to secrete its enzymes. So there's just this huge enzymatic process to break down whatever we consume into the smallest bits possible, distributed through the bloodstream into our body. So the small intestine is going to secrete more enzymes, but it's also going to absorb nutrients, and the colon is going to reabsorb a lot of water that is part of the digestive process, put it back into our body, and by doing so, it's also going to take in minerals and vitamins, and then the rest is excreted. So actually, pretty interesting process when you look at it from a view of nutrition. So metabolism, this is the physical and chemical reaction that produces and uses energy. So some of us have high metabolism, some of us have low metabolisms, meaning that some of us can eat a ton of food and our bodies will handle it very, very well, push it through, and getting the nutrients as it goes, whereas some of us can eat very little and our bodies will have these same chemical reactions, but they will store lots of fats and hold on to it for later. So for those of us with slow metabolisms, it's better to eat less. Those of us with fast metabolisms, of course, you need to maintain whatever is needed. But really, when we're talking about metabolism, I have a fast or slow metabolism, we're really just talking about the speed at which enzyme reactions occur. So there are a lot of digestive enzymes. So here's just some examples of the pancreatic enzymes. So you have amylase, which breaks starches down. You have trypsin, or the chymotrypsin. These are proteins, breaking proteins into amino acids. And then the lipases, as you would guess, right? The root of that word being lipid. These are fats that are being turned into monoglycerides and fatty acids. So I want you to hit your pause button after I give you an explanation of this. So for the next several slides, I'm just going to show you a figure, and I want you to think through that figure and figure out what you're learning about enzymes. What are they capable of doing just from looking at the figure? So here you go. This is our first figure. Hit the pause button. What is this enzyme doing? Okay, hopefully you're back. So what you'll see is this enzyme in particular, right? You have this double molecule that's coming into the enzyme. The enzyme is splitting those molecules and pushing them out. So this is something that happens. You could think of this as lactose. So it's a disaccharide or 2 sugar molecule in milk that is often consumed by us as humans, and that comes in, right? If you have lactose, if you have the enzyme here, the lactase, what will happen is lactose will come into lactase, it will split, and you will not have any digestive problems. If you don't have the enzyme and you can't split the disaccharide of lactase, that lactose, that's when you get in trouble. Okay, here's the next figure. I'm going to put it up. I want you to hit the pause button and figure out what you can learn as well. Okay, hopefully you're back here. What do you think's happening here when you look at this? What's being taught to us? So what it's actually showing us is that enzymes are very specific, right? And they can only work with certain substrates. So it's pretty unusual to have an enzyme that can work across multiple substrates all the time. They're very specific. This is part of the reason that it's important to make sure that you're eating a broad diet, you're getting lots of nutrients, that your body's very healthy so that it can produce all the enzymes at the needed level to have a healthy body. Okay, here's another one. I want you to look at this. And this figure's a little bit more complex, so hit the pause button for a little bit longer. Make sure you understand exactly what's happening here. Okay, so looking at this, you can see that we have the reactant here. We have a reaction with an enzyme and without an enzyme. So what do you notice? You notice right away that with the enzyme, it brings the amount of energy needed to form the same reaction. Now whatever, let's say that this reactant needs to be split into A and B products, that can still happen without an enzyme, but it just takes a lot more effort. Essentially doubling the effort is when there's an enzyme involved. This is why enzymes are so important to our bodies. Here's another example, right? So here's a sugar that's going to come into the enzyme. It attaches. There might be some water involved here, but the substrate gets converted into products, and then they're released. But I want to show you as well. There's a video there's a video that we can show you in a minute where it shows the opposite. Enzymes can also combine things. They don't just break down. They can also combine things. So here's an example of missing enzymes so we talked about this already, right? Lactase is the enzyme that breaks down lactose, and lactose is the major molecule in milk. Lack of lactase leads to digestive problems. For those, I'm sure there's a good chunk of you in this classroom that are lactose intolerant. But lactosis is when there is a lack of lactase. And essentially what you have is you have lactose plus water and lactase. You break it down. There's this beta 1,4 link. Don't worry about that. That's too much information. But there's a link between the two molecules, and it's called beta 1,4, and that's what lactase breaks. And if you don't have it, if you don't have lactase, you can't break that bond, and the molecule stays together, leading to digestive issues. So when we look across the world, this is the part of the world where these are the parts of the world where you look to see the amount of lactose intolerance around the world. And I want you to just look at that map really carefully and just kind of start to diagnose where's the most lactose intolerance in the world, where's the least. And then I'm going to put this map up. This is a map of milk consumption in the world. So kind of take a look at that and see what you notice right off the bat. And one of the things you probably noticed is, now there's definitely some exceptions, but for the most part, where humans in the world consume the least amount of milk, those are the areas with the highest amount of lactose intolerance. And that is because lactase normally stays in all other mammals, only stays around until that mammal is weaned from its mother, and then lactase leaves the human system, or leaves the body. Sorry, not the human system. If it's any animal, right? This could be a raccoon, beaver, deer, whatever. When they are weaned from the mother, lactase stops being formed in their bodies. But in humans, for whatever reason, because we continue to eat dairy products, oftentimes, well into adulthood and beyond, all the way to death for some, lactase is preserved. But you'll see in areas of the world that are largely non-European, where the food is not composed of, where the food does not have a lot of dairy, those parts of the world also show large amounts of lactose intolerance. So here's the enzyme review I mentioned. You can watch this. I'm not going to watch this video, but it's just about a minute long. It actually shows how an enzyme can combine two substrates instead of break apart, just to emphasize that that is also a possibility. And then here's some biology in the news that pertains to us, which is interesting, right? So we think about religions around the world, and I know as Latter-day Saints, we often pat ourselves on the back about, that we don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't do drugs, those types of things, and those are very important as well. But in terms of overall health, there are other groups that actually do better than us, or that have been shown at times to do better than us. One of them are the Seventh-day Adventists. They have these strict dietary practices where they eat mostly plant-based diet, very minimal saturated fats, cholesterol, and salt and sugar, and they live better than LDS individuals. They have lower disease rates and longer lives. And then the Amish, which is on the other end of the spectrum, also living better than Latter-day Saints, but they're consuming 3,600 calories a day, which includes a lot of saturated fat, yet they stay slim, have lower rates of heart disease and diabetes, and that is almost certainly due to the fact that they are working just as hard as they are consuming, which is maybe different than our cultural practices. So just another emphasize, right, this idea of supersize me versus portion size me, just this ability of us to make simple changes to control our nutrient intake. And that's where we'll stop today. I hope you have a fantastic day. And again, if there are any issues that you're having in the class, please reach out to the TAs and or me, and we will do our very best to resolve your issues.